She's young, beautiful, successful, and has everything to live for. But someone wants her dead.
Hello?
I'll find you. I don't give up.
Hello and welcome to Staff Picks, the podcast for movie nerds by movie nerds. As always, I'm Mario Lanza, and I am your host on our journey through the movies out there that just need a little more love. And tonight, once again, we are part of Horror Month 2022, where I try to introduce you to 8 horror movies that I have always loved, that I think perhaps do not get the amount of attention that they have ever deserved. And tonight's movie is an especially interesting one for this subject, because what we were talking about tonight is a TV movie. And I know a lot of people may roll their eyes when they hear the fact that I'm talking about a TV movie, but I'm telling you, if you guys didn't grow up in the 70s and the 80s when they had these made-for-TV horror movies like the Movie of the Week, there were some fantastic ones back in the day. And the one I've picked for tonight is one of the all-time greats. This is one that a lot of people remember seeing. I don't know what network it was on, but I just remember I have heard they saw it on TV. It really affected them. And again, this is one you can find. It's not impossible to find. You're not going to find it on Netflix or any of that streaming garbage. But if you know where to look, you can find this movie. And the one I've chosen is a 1978 movie called Someone's Watching Me, which I have to say is one of the all-time world's worst titles for a movie. But again, TV executives pick the title, so whatever. But anyway, it came out in 1978. It's a TV movie about a woman being stalked in a high-rise building, and it's good enough on its own. On its own, I would talk about this movie. I would love to recommend it to people. It's a creepy movie. It's eerie. You remember it. There's lots of little effective moments in it. But there's something even more important about this movie, and that is the director. And what I will say is, this was the first movie ever directed by John Carpenter, who you can make the argument is the all-time greatest horror movie director in Hollywood, known for Halloween, Big Trouble in Little China, The Thing, The Fog, lots of stuff. This was his first movie. This is the John Carpenter origin story. And for years, it was called the Lost John Carpenter movie. So there's a lot of really interesting historical significance in this movie, despite the fact that it's a TV movie. And I will tell you right now, there's a lot of little tricks he uses in this movie that he later realized, hey, that was kind of cool. I'm going to do that later in Halloween. So there's a lot of little parallels between this and Halloween that I want to talk to you about. And I'm going to bring on my guest for this one. This is one of my oldest friends on the internet. We have known each other through MySpace, Facebook, Twitter, everything for years. We talk about movies all the time. He may have been the one to turn me on to this movie. I'm not entirely sure. But even if he didn't, he's one of the biggest John Carpenter fans I know. So I've been dying to get him on an episode to talk about Someone's Watching Me, the long-lost John Carpenter movie. So anyway, welcome back to the show, my friend Christopher Chardi.
Hey, Mario. Thanks for having me back on. I'm very happy to talk about this movie. As you said, I'm a big Carpenter fan. 2 minor corrections.
Okay.
He did have 2 films before this.
What?
Yeah. Well, if you don't count his student film Dark Star, there was also Assault on Precinct 13 in 1976.
Oh, I didn't realize that came before this.
Yeah. But this is cool because he shot this before Halloween. This was actually in the works as early as 76. It was based on a real woman in Chicago, and it was initially called High Rise. So it had a better title. And then it ended up coming out the month after Halloween, if you can imagine that. So it is one of his first, and it was made at a time where he was still sort of breaking through. But can you imagine, like, this aired on TV the month after Halloween came out, and everybody knew who he was at that point.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate this one thing, and I want you to perhaps elaborate on this as well. These old TV movies, like, there is no equivalent to this any day, today, where there's just horror movies on TV on ABC every Sunday. Like, please back me up. This was a major part of growing up in the 70s and 80s, these weekly TV movies. And every so often you'd get a gem like this. You'd get Duel by Steven Spielberg. You'd get Dark Night of the Scarecrow. You'd get Don't Go to Sleep. Like, this was a big part of growing up back in that era.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's something I miss. It's something we just don't have anymore. I love a lot of these old horror TV movies. Duel is I think it's the best TV movie ever made. Spielberg made it in like 2 weeks and on a shoestring budget, and you look at it, you go, how in the hell did he do this? The Night Stalker, which was also written by Richard Matheson as Duel was. The Midnight Hour we were talking about before. Dark Night of the Scarecrow. There's a bunch of great ones. And it's sort of a lost art form, but there's a lot of gems in there, and this is one of them. And I was the one that turned you onto this film, because I programmed a remote TV movie marathon, I think 2 Octobers ago, online with some friends, and I slotted this in first movie. And I figured, well, this is John Carpenter, and I've heard of it, but I've never seen it, and it's got to be pretty good. And I was floored by how good it was. Like, this is actually one of my favorite Carpenter films, believe it or not.
So you had never seen this until 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Wow. So, okay, let me paint a picture for my listeners here. Chris is one of the biggest John Carpenter fans I know. He knows every John Carpenter movie. He had never seen this movie until 2 years ago. Halloween. I still think Halloween is the all-time greatest horror movie. I love every single thing about Halloween. I've done a staff picks on it. I just love that movie. I had never heard of this movie. So you got these two John Carpenter horrors who had never heard of this movie, and this movie is literally like a blueprint for Halloween. I'm like, this movie has got to be a Staff Picks episode. It's killing me it took me this long to finally get around to it, and I'm hoping I'm already blowing your minds, letting you know that there's this great John Carpenter movie out there that virtually nobody has ever heard of.
Well, and as you said, this was considered the lost Carpenter film for decades, and it was rarely available on home video for a long time. It was actually released on VHS in Europe. There was never a VHS release in America. And then it finally came out on DVD in 2007. And then Scream Factory put out a Blu-ray, I don't think too long ago, which I still don't have and I need to get. But yeah, this is, for a long time, this was kind of just forgotten. And you kind of had to hunt it down. It was one of those movies I heard the title over and over through the years and didn't know where to find it.
It's funny, right before this podcast, Chris and I were bitching about streaming services. We don't like streaming services because what they do is they create a very artificially small library of movies you can pick from, and they're usually ones that are better well-known, cheaper movies, stuff that you can get. This is a movie that will never, ever show up on a streaming service, I would guess. So you really have to be creative to go out and find a copy of this, and it's so well worth it. And it really galls me that there's all these movies and movie history that will be forgotten because the streaming services took everything over. So, again, I could not feel more strongly about this movie. Again, on Staff Picks, I pride myself on picking horror movies that are not really for horror fans. I don't pick stuff that's bloody. I don't do slashers, nothing torture-y, nothing that jump scares you to death. And this movie is right up my alley. Like, there's not a drop of blood in this movie. There's barely any jump scares. It's just all tension and camera work and stalking and music. And again, it's so similar to Halloween. I would say all those same things about Halloween. So again, I really want to delve into this one for people who I know have never seen this before.
Yeah, and I'll reiterate, this was worked on before Halloween. So it was really the progenitor of Halloween, and Black Christmas too, if we want to go that route. But yeah, in terms of Carpenter's career, this set a lot of things in motion. And he only had 18 days to shoot this too. and very limited time. He only could shoot what he absolutely needed to shoot. He couldn't. I don't think he did any pickup shots or anything. Although I did notice Lauren Hutton and I think a couple other characters seem to be looped a lot of the dialogue. I don't know why. Lauren Hutton said this was the best thing she'd ever done at that point. Now, I don't know how long she felt that way, but, she had high praise for it. And it was nominated for an Edgar Award, too. I'm not even sure what that is. But
it sounds amazing.
Yeah. And, of course, John met Adrienne Barbeau doing this, who he would eventually marry. So, it's such an interesting film in his career and so overlooked. And like you said, it's similar to Halloween in its construction, and it actually predates Halloween in terms of the filming and everything. So this is such an important movie, and nobody talks about it. And it's so well done, too.
Yeah, okay, let's you yada-yada'd over a couple things there. Let's summarize this movie for people. So this movie stars Lauren Hutton, who was a supermodel at the time, very famous for the gap between her teeth. Arguably the biggest supermodel in the world at one point, I believe. And at one point she branched off into modeling, into acting. And this is one of her first movies, I believe. I don't know a whole lot of other ones of her movies. I know she did Once Bitten with Jim Carrey, which I'm guessing is not her favorite of her movies.
Yeah.
But you said this was her favorite movie she ever did. How many other movies did she do? I was not aware she had this significant acting career.
Well, I'm looking at her IMDb, and she has 59 credits, which is
wow,
pretty decent. Some of these are TV series, though. She had been acting for 10 years prior to this movie.
Oh, okay.
So she had quite a few. But yeah, she had a pretty decent career. Like I said, I don't know if she still thinks it's one of her best works or what, but she had high praise for it at the time, at least.
Was she an American Gigolo? For some reason, I think she was.
Yes, 1980. Yeah.
So she was doing legitimate, like, acclaimed dramatic movies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I take it back. I was gonna lead off my review by saying she wasn't really a known actress, but she does a pretty good job in this. But I take that back. She was a known actress. And anyway, she's the woman who gets stalked in this movie. She's the Jamie Lee Curtis, if you want to make Halloween comparisons. And it's really just she's a young career girl. She's a TV producer, moves to Los Angeles, moves to a high-rise building, and right from the start there's a stalker in the building across the street that somehow knows everything about her. That's the short version, the Cliff's Notes version of this movie.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And again, this is a reason why I love John Carpenter probably more than any director. He takes a simple premise and he just, wrings every last drop out of it, especially in the way this is shot. Mm-hmm. Lots of homages to Hitchcock, I think, in this. I think it's fair to say, especially Rear Window, and yet it does its own thing. Now, the opening credits, I will say, I think is a very strong homage to Alfred Hitchcock. And there are a couple other moments, too. But it's different, too. It's similar but different. And it's different enough that I think it warrants being held up as unique. And I think one of his best works, too, honestly.
Yeah, and for one of the things for lay people, a lot of people just think of Halloween as the first slasher movie, which may or not be the case, but John Carpenter never described Halloween that way. He described it as an homage to Hitchcock.
Yeah, which makes sense. Yeah.
It makes sense, and a lot of people don't realize that. So this movie is an homage to Hitchcock. Halloween is an homage to Hitchcock. So many little camera tricks he was good at. One thing I love in this movie in particular, John Carpenter loves to use the ringing of the phone as a jump scare. Like, it's not a nasty jump scare, it will permeate the silence when you hear the phone ring. And because the phone is always a stalker, it's always an unexpected, unhappy intrusion into their world. So it's just lots of little tricks he does in a movie that, on paper, this movie is a big nothing burger. It's just a woman being stalked. There's nothing interesting about it. It's all style. That's all I will say.
And again, to me, that's John Carpenter's talent. He could take anything and get an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes out of it, and really put you in the situation. He's great with atmosphere. He's got a lot of tricks that he uses in all his films, like claustrophobic hallway shots and stuff like that, and getting down low so everything seems giant, and all the Carpenter trademarks are here already. And he just wrings every last drop out of this movie.
One of my favorite Carpenter trademarks is where there's music in the background, like the woman's in an apartment looking around looking for the bad guy. Then all of a sudden the music will drop out. There's no music for the next 5 minutes. And I cannot tell you how unnerving that is, because that's not something they normally do in horror movies. And Carpenter will not let you off the hook with a cheap jump scare either. He just likes wringing that tension of no music in the background. And again, I got to point out, this was a TV movie. They could not do anything that's not appropriate for TV, yet this movie is still terrifying. He still pulls it off.
Yeah. Yeah, and I meant to say earlier that I think the limitations of the TV movie art form actually kind of help in this instance too, because there's stuff that he can't show, there's places he can't quite go, although he does really sort of tread that fine line in a couple of these scenes, which we'll talk about. There's some interesting themes for 1978 too. So he goes as far as he can, but it's interesting.
Okay, 2 more things before we delve into the plot of this movie. And again, the plot is very simple. This will not be an exceptionally long podcast, but there's some couple historical things that are interesting about this movie. You mentioned one of them, Adrienne Barbeau. Our main heroine, Lauren Hutton, she has a best friend, Adrienne Barbeau, works with her at the TV station. A is a lesbian, which is a really odd plot choice for 1978. I did not know they had lesbians in, key roles in movies, and it's like not even a major part of their character. She's just a lesbian that happens to be the side character. Like, that's very progressive for 1978.
Yeah. It's not made too much of a big deal out of. They kind of have a friendly joke about it, and they kind of move on, and it's really cool.
And then Adrienne Barbeau ended up marrying John Carpenter. I don't know if people know that they were man and wife. And he always says he met her on the set of this movie. So this movie, Someone's Watching Me, was very significant to John Carpenter because he met his wife.
Yeah, and as you said, it's definitely a precursor to Halloween too. So there's a lot of stuff going on here.
Okay, and one more thing before we get into the plot. I showed this movie to my wife. She liked it. I showed this movie to my daughter, and she liked it. And I asked both of them why they liked it. And they both had a very similar answer. And I'm not sure as a guy you will get this answer, Chris. They both said the woman in peril never does anything dumb. She's never a wuss. And her first instinct is always to fight back because this is my house and screw you.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
They really love that because the woman is not a ninny in this movie.
No, I do too. Of course I do. And I even put that in my notes. But I think that's a Carpenter trait too. If you look at all his movies, he pretty much treats female characters that way in all of them. Like I said, go back to Assault on Precinct 13. Mm-hmm. Strong female characters in that one too, right out of the gate. I can't really think of any of his movies where I'd say, oh, that female character is just like a shrinking daffodil or whatever they say. I think he's really good at it. And especially in this one, Lauren Hutton, she will not take any crap. She never backs down. We'll get into it, how deep she goes, almost off the deep end. But it's great. Yeah, it's definitely one of this film's best qualities. And it makes it so much fun to watch, too.
Yeah, there's no cliches in this movie, and if there were, it's inventing cliches. That's what I like to say. Okay, so anyway, this movie aired on November 29, 1978, which I believe is a month after Halloween aired or debuted.
Right.
So, man, what a fun time to be alive if you're a horror fan. You got two huge John Carpenter peak movies coming out within a month of each other. So anyway, 1978 was the fall of John Carpenter, and with that, I think we're ready to delve into the plot of this, one that I've really wanted to talk about for a long time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So the movie opens in the stalker's apartment. Okay, there's a horrible stalker in this movie. He stalks young women. He finds out everything about their life. He breaks into their apartment. He puts bugs in their room. He terrorizes them. He's just a monster. And it's very effective because we're never going to see him through most of the movie. But the movie opens from his point of view, which I always thought was really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very, very, very stylized opening, even before we get to the stylized opening credits. But yeah, it really sets that tone immediately. It's probably the most stylized part of the whole movie is just opening couple of minutes.
Yeah, so what do we see? We see the stalker. He's got a telescope that's really long. I should point out phallic telescope, probably not unintentional.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, the long phallic telescope where he can invade all these women's privacies in these high-rise buildings. He's got a phone tap machine. He's got a tape recorder. We see all his equipment. And the movie opens with him in the late stages of stalking a woman named Elizabeth, where he calls her up. He's like, "Why weren't you at work today, Elizabeth?" And she's like, look, stop, you won. Like, and we get the sense he's been stalking her for a long time. She's like, I'm leaving. Don't leave me, Elizabeth. I'll find you. I'll always find you. I don't give up. Sweet dreams. And that's the ominous opening as we go into the credits then.
And you're going to, this is another theme throughout this movie, is there's really only one guy in this movie who's not a total creeper. And we'll get to that. So in setting you up right from the beginning, you're going to see a lot of male characters who have these similar kind of traits, some more than others. But, yeah, they're all kind of in the same boat in a way. And then, so we jump into the credits. And as I said, this is got to be a huge Hitchcock homage. Even the credits themselves look like they were made by Saul Bass, who did all Hitchcock's credits. The score kicks in hard. Sounds like Bernard Herrmann, who scored many of Hitchcock's films. So it's not subtle, but it quickly gets into Carpenter land. We start going into a unique direction.
Okay, so let's meet our hero here. Our hero of the movie, and again, there's not very many characters in this movie. It's a really simple screenplay. This is Lee Michaels. She is a TV producer, 29 years old, played by a very young Lauren Hutton. They're trying to pass her off as 29. I do not buy that she's 29.
Yeah.
Considering you said she'd been acting for 10 years, I don't believe that she's 29. But
yeah.
So Lee has moved to Los Angeles, and at the start of the movie, we see her in her new building, the Arkham Towers, which are just a fantastic name for a building. This huge high-rise, and she's moving up almost into a penthouse suite, really high up in the building. And I love this building. My wife is just jealous when she sees Lee's apartment in this movie. It's like massive, and there's windows all over the place. Everything is like computer controlled. It's brand new. It's clean. It's just like the perfect, awesome apartment a woman moving into the city would want to live in.
Yeah. And she, on several occasions, she makes reference to the fact that she's just moved to L.A. and, she's all excited and starting this career and everything. And it's a pretty swank pad. It's not a studio apartment, as it has separate rooms.
It looks like a 2-bedroom, if anything. It's big.
Yeah. Kind of looks like something out of Three's Company, but that just might be the decor. And the earth tones, we're in the earth tones era at this point. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
And of course, the big defining trait, again, the building is all computer controlled. It's state of the art for 1978. Everything is controlled. Climate, elevators, locks, it's all computer controlled. This will become very important later in the movie when the stalker has access to the computers. But the number one feature in her apartment is she has a huge balcony with about 100 windows. So she can stand out there and look out over Los Angeles, and she loves it. She's got a balcony. But for a enterprising young stalker across the street, this is also good news because he sees her out on her balcony, and we get a shot of him looking through his phallic telescope saying, "Oh, look at this, a new girl in town."
Yeah. Yeah, and this is like Rear Window on steroids here. This set, which is just amazing. And there are shots in this movie where I actually, well, we'll get to that at the end of the movie particularly. I don't know how they shot it. I mean, it looks like it's actually in an apartment building in LA, but I don't know how they were able to do that.
Interesting. Okay.
Because they are way up there.
I think you're talking about the last scene in the movie. That's what you're talking about. Okay. Okay, so we see Lee, again, young career woman moving to the big city. We find out later, it's kind of important, why she left New York. She was being stalked by a coworker.
Yeah.
She moves to New York, or to L.A. All of a sudden, every guy she meets is hitting on her. We get a really interesting time capsule of what life was like for a young Mary Tyler Moore type in the early 70s. The woman in a business surrounded by men, she is constantly being hit on, and we see this right off the bat in her first day at work.
Yeah. And one of the interesting parts is where she's talking to herself, trying to prep herself to talk to the boss. And then she says something like, I hope that's not going to be a problem being single. Like she just expects to be harassed, and she's kind of just prepping herself for that. So she's been through a lot, and she's also very strong too, and she knows what she has to deal with, for better or worse.
Yeah, and that's one thing we'll keep coming back to. She is not a weak character. She knows what she's doing.
One thing I want to add is that there's like one real small moment where she's kind of unpacking and getting everything set up in the apartment, and she says something about being alone, and at first she seems excited, and then she has this amazing like facial expression that kind of changes, and she's, for a split second, she's kind of like, oh God, like I really am alone. It's interesting. It's a vulnerability that she shows. Not much through the movie, but she does have her moments. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Okay, and now she's at her first day at work at a TV studio. Again, she's a live television director. She directs which cameras go to which shot, which actor is going to be on the air during live TV. And basically her first day at work, she's thrown into the pressure cooker. And she succeeds, even though she kind of doubts herself. Am I going to be able to do this? She pulls it off amazingly, along with, and this is where we meet her best friend Sophie, played by Adrienne Barbeau, kind of helps her. And so the boss says, wow, good job. You're really good at TV. So right off the bat, Lee is good at TV. She's developed a friend. Her and Sophie go back to the office. And it's in here that this is where we learn that Sophie's lesbian, right?
Yes.
Okay, which, again, not the type of plot line you're really going to see in a movie in 1978.
Yeah, and it's dealt with so subtly. It's like, oh, this is just the way it is. And like I said, they make a quick joke about it, and it's a very like charming moment. And yeah, they don't make a big deal out of it. They don't belittle it. It's really cool.
I think if I recall, they also point out that they both left their last jobs because of stalkers, that Lee was getting stalked by a man and Sophie was getting stalked by a woman. So they have something in common.
Yeah. And I think they kind of bond over that too. And, because Lauren Hutton's character, Lee, is putting up with this crap as soon as she gets there. And Adrienne Barbeau is kind of like helping her to get through it. And she said, that's just the beginning. He's like a Mountie, and she said, well, this Mountie isn't going to get his whatever it is, or something like that. So they're kind of like bonding over the fact that they've been harassed. It's very interesting.
Yeah, so these two are fast friends, Lee and Sophie. And again, this is not a buddy comedy. This is a horror movie. So the horror is going to ramp up pretty quick here, where it's Lee's first day at work and somebody calls her. She gets a mysterious phone call in her office, and she picks it up, and it's a very distinct voice. We'll be hearing this voice a lot in the movie. He says, Miss Michaels? And she's like, yes. And he's like, I thought so. And he hangs up. And she's like, huh, weird. Now, unbeknownst to her, but knownst to us, why he's doing this, he wants to verify she's at work because he is in her apartment right now setting bugs. And this is going to be the crux of the movie.
Yeah, and it gets crazier later on. Well, I won't jump the gun, but yeah, she eventually figures this out. I'll say that.
Okay, so let's just yada through this. She goes through her first day at work. The boss says she does a great job. there's one of the guys, the switchboard operator in her company, of course, hits on her because that's just what happens. And she turns him down, and she's like, it's the same here as any other job. But she's like, you know what? I think it's going to work out here. And Sophie's like, yeah, I think so too. And so it's meant to look like her life had a nice, happy achievement here. But now the movie's going to start turning into a John Carpenter movie where she goes back to her apartment that day, and now the scary stuff starts.
Yeah. And there is one scene or one shot in this scene that is so creepy. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you know what it is.
Mm-hmm. I know exactly.
It's almost 16 minutes in. And it's one of those shots you watch a couple times in a row. It's like, that's so effective. I can't even nail down why that's so effective. But you can see him moving towards Halloween already. Now, should we say what that shot is, or?
Of course, we're walking people through the movie because I know most people have never seen this before.
Yeah.
So I'll set it up, and you can talk about the scene in question. So she comes home to her first apartment, the Arkham Tower, and she walks in there, and she notices her door is ajar, and she's like, "Huh?" And she walks inside, and she's like, "Has someone been in here?" And she's like, "Hello, hello," and she's really suspicious, as she should be, and as she's there, she announces, "I'm a black belt. I know karate. You don't want to mess with me." But no one's in her apartment. And then she sees that her new phone is there. Her new phone has been installed for younger people. The phone company had to come in and physically put a phone in your apartment, hook it up. They had to when you had a new apartment. So she's like, "Oh, good. My new phone is here." And she walks up. She's like, apparently someone from the phone company installed my phone, left the door open. She's relieved. And this is where we get what's not quite a jump scare, but it is definitely something that will get your attention.
Yeah, it is a quintessential Carpenter move. And in fact, the camera is moving, I believe, as this happens. We see her on the phone. In the background, we see a guy just run to the right, dressed in black, just out of nowhere behind her. It's like, oh my God, it's so creepy. He just bolts for the door. And again, as you said, I don't think there's any music in this part. It's dead silent. But the visual is just so freaky.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
That is definitely one of the best moments in the movie. John Carpenter is so good at that. It looks like it's a scary scene. All the tension is relieved. The heroine lets down her guard, and she kind of turns to the right. And as she's turning, a shadow bolts behind her in the background. It doesn't attack her. You just weren't expecting that man to run across the... So the stalker was in her apartment the whole time. And this is what's creepy about this movie. He will be in her apartment a lot, and she will never know.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one aspect of this that I think this is almost like a giallo film to me. Not just a slasher film, but a giallo, because it has more of that kind of feel to it. Just like an elegant slasher. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I see elements of that. I could be wrong. I don't know if that was a conscious influence on Carpenter for this, but that's how it feels to me. This feels like a giallo film.
Yeah, it's definitely got a distinct feel. It's not your typical TV horror movie, and it's not your typical theater horror movie. And it's just all tension. And this first night, when she's at the Arkham apartment all by herself, this is where it's going to start ramping up, where she's going to start getting phone calls. And the phone calls will be relentless. And first, it's the coworker at her job who was trying to hit on her. He calls twice. She blows him off. Then the third time, it's the stalker. Mm-hmm. And this is something I really have to get across to my younger viewers. When you were in the 70s and 80s and 90s and the phone rang, you had no idea who it was.
Yeah, that's right.
It could be anybody. And again, if someone starts stalking you, you take your phone off the hook, you unplug it. There's a way to get around that. But you also miss every other call. And so much of your life was determined by phones and outside communication with people. It was a very intrusive way when strangers could call you and you wouldn't know who they are and you had to answer and listen to them breathe or make sexual noises or hang up. And again, Carpenter uses this so well, this creepy phone that never stops ringing. The minute she's done with one call, he will call back, and he never says anything. He just breathes, and it's really unnerving.
Yeah, he also does this trick where there's multiple times in this movie where she'll get a couple calls in a row and you don't know who. It's like a roulette wheel. You don't know who's going to show up,
Hmm.
and then yeah, so that just adds to the suspense because sometimes it'll be one person twice in a row and then somebody else. It's kind of crazy.
And Carpenter uses that trick again in Halloween with the calls from Linda and Annie.
Right.
I just want to point that out. That's a Carpenter trope. Yeah, but at the end of the night, she gets unnerved. She's getting all these phone calls from somebody she doesn't know, and then the camera pans down underneath her desk. She's got a little desk where her phone is on, and there's a bug. You see a little bug he has planted underneath her table. That's why he was in her apartment. He can hear everything she does in her apartment, and she's not going to be aware of this until later in the movie. And that's why he's got so much power over her, and she doesn't understand how.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing I wanted to mention. Like, there were a lot of movies in the 70s about the surveillance state, too, especially after Watergate. I think The Conversation would be probably the biggest example. There was a lot of this paranoia going on in the 70s. So that's another element here that I think people don't talk about very much is just the exploration of surveillance and loss of privacy and paranoia.
Mm-hmm.
It runs through this movie too.
Yeah, I was going to say this really isn't a horror movie. It's a paranoia movie.
Yeah, I guess that's fair to say. I mean, I would still call it horror, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Okay, so let's move along. So the next day, Sophie, this is Adrienne Barbeau, her buddy, comes over to the apartment, and they start setting up. They're moving in furniture. And I forget if Lee mentions the stalker yet. She's going to mention it soon. Right now, Lee is the only one who knows about it. But now Lee is going to start getting packages. And this stalker's got some style points. Why don't you talk about his gifts he likes to send to Lee?
Well, first of all, he's he's sending her this thing about a free 6-month vacation from I can't remember the name of the company that he made up. Can you?
Excursions Unlimited.
Yeah. So even back then they were getting these scams. And she and Adrienne Barbeau's character are sitting around trying to figure out, is this legit? Is this a scam? What's going on here? So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, definite style points for that.
Yes, this first gift she gets is from Excursions Unlimited. It's a big telescope. And basically the note says, go outside, look around. And this, again, it's just a cheap trap. He's trying to lure her out onto her balcony more so he can look at her. But she doesn't realize that yet. And there's all these notes that say, you're going to get a trivia question or some location quiz. And if you guess the location, that you'll get a free trip. So she thinks it's a scam, but you know what? It was a free telescope, so she takes it for now. But they also are both a little wary. Why are people sending me gifts? They're not stupid. They think this is a hoax.
Right.
And now that next night, now the stalker is going to start upping his game. This night where Lee is sitting on her couch, smoking. By the way, Lauren Hutton smokes as much as anybody I've ever seen in a movie in this movie.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, but the time capsule of the movie, everyone smoked in the 70s. But yeah, Laura Hutton's always sitting there on her couch smoking. But this next night, now the stalker is going to start unnerving her a little more. Now he starts hacking into her electrical system. And again, that's what I said earlier. This whole apartment is based around computers. He has access to it. So here come the dimming of the lights.
Right. And I think okay, I see. I think we kind of hopped around here time-wise, because did we get to the part where she met David Burney's character? I think we're right around.
No, we're
there.
right before that. He's the scene after this.
Okay, because the telescope doesn't come till later.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, first he sends her the thing from that company, and they're trying to figure out if it's a scam. Then later on comes the telescope, and then we'll get to that.
Okay. So let's have her meet her boyfriend. There's one other character. There's like 4 characters in this movie.
Yeah.
She's going to meet her boyfriend, Paul. One night she goes out to the bar. She's unnerved because the lights are dimming in her apartment. She's getting crank phone calls. She just wants to get out. It's kind of creepy to be in her house. And she goes out to a bar, and This is an interesting one because she actually walks up and picks up this guy.
Yeah, it's kind of a switcheroo here. So we have this whole setup of, surveillance and stalking and harassing, and then she goes to this bar and now she's the aggressor. It's kind of interesting, and I love this little exchange here, where she touches him. You know what I'm talking about? And he goes, "What are you testing?" And she says, "I have strange fears." And he goes, "Really? What?" And she says, "Being raped by dwarves." You could have been sitting up there on stilts. I had to check. Like, what a weird exchange.
Yeah, through this stretch, they really try to portray her as being kind of goofy and odd and having a weird sense of humor.
Yeah.
And that drops later. They drop that later in the movie. But yeah, for one scene here, like all of a sudden she's a stand-up comedian.
Yeah. I don't know. She's like borderline kind of stalking this guy, but the sense of humor kind of cuts it, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, so this guy's name is Paul, and she asks him out, and they go on a date and go walking around, and what happens? He's a philosophy professor at USC, if I recall, right?
Yeah, and then she starts talking to him about her mom and how she never believed any of her problems growing up and said, "There you go, being wacky again." That was what she used to say to her all the time. So they're just having these kind of interesting moments walking around at night. It's kind of cool.
It's a meet cute. That's what they call it.
Right. And I'll say another element of this movie I love is you get a lot of scenic late 70s LA. It's all over this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Downtown LA, and it looks so cool. It's one of my favorite parts of this.
Yeah, I was going to say that. This movie is a wonderful time capsule of Los Angeles in 1978.
Yeah. And there are times where the buildings and the cityscape become very much part of the plot, too.
And Paul, her boyfriend, they will stay together for the rest of the movie. He will be the one man in this movie who's not creepy to her. So he's the one good guy.
That's right.
Yeah, although I will say we will fall into some of the tropes later in the movie where he has to solve the problem, he has to save the day. So John Carpenter making an effort to make a feminist horror movie, but even he will fall into the tropes where she's sitting there catatonic on the couch and he's like, "I know what I'll do. I'll go fix this." So
well, he's just trying to help.
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, this whole scene is creepy where she and Paul are walking around LA and we see they're being followed. The stalker will not let Lee alone. He is following her on her date. We see him peering through the bushes. We hear him like growling. He does not like that she has a boyfriend. And this is a bad thing.
That point of view shot behind the bushes is so cool. And then actually this is one of my favorite shots in the whole movie. Lee is searching for Paul, who kind of disappears. And she runs up and her face is lit in this almost like noir kind of way. And then you see in the background the skyscraper and you see this elevator go up the side. It's this long shot, and it's the only thing in the shot that's moving. It's so cool. I can't even really explain why it's so cool, but it's creepy, and it just ratchets up the suspense, like what's going to happen next.
Okay, so now that she's met her boyfriend, now we're going to go back to the apartment. And pretty much the next half hour of the movie is this guy just tormenting Lee. Not Paul, not the boyfriend, the stalker, tormenting Lee as much as he can. We get scenes of the lights flickering on and off. We get at one point he calls and says, "Is your air conditioning out?" And then her air conditioning stops. Like he just has all this control over her apartment, and she's getting a little unnerved. Although there's a little detail here I kind of forgot, and I forgot to mention it. She's watching TV one night while the stalking's going on, and if you listen on the TV, it says, what does it say?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It says there was a young woman, Elizabeth Solly, 25 years old, who jumped to death from a high-rise building. If you know the movie, that's the girl that he was stalking earlier in the movie. She jumped to her death of suicide to get away from him. That's his M.O. That is what's going to try to be the ending of this movie here. This is what this guy does. Torments these girls, gets them to kill themselves off high rises. It's a neat little foreshadowing. We hear it on the news report that he just killed his last girl.
I caught that too, and I was tripping out. I'm like, oh man, that's such a great little element. And not only that, but Elizabeth Solly is the name of Jamie Lee Curtis's character in The Fog.
I just read that. Yeah, that's a little John Carpenter expanded universe.
Yeah, there's a couple of things in here that he reused too. We'll get to those, but yeah, I was tripping when I noticed that news report. That was so cool. So this is where she gets the telescope, and immediately assembles it for some reason. They kind of skip forward, and she's made the whole thing and just sitting there on the floor. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's right. So Excursions Unlimited keeps sending her gifts. They give her the telescope. Next after that is a candy box which has a bikini in it, right?
Yeah. Super creepy.
Yeah, very excited to see her in her bikini out on the balcony. That's really all he wants.
Yeah.
And of course, he calls, "Present number 2, Lee. I hope it fits."
Yeah. Oh.
Okay, so now Paul comes over for a date, the boyfriend, and he notices that Lee's a little rattled. She's getting these gifts, she's getting these phone calls, and this is where she first kind of spills her guts to Paul and says what's going on.
And it's a really interesting shot too, because it mostly focuses on her, kind of zooms to the right on her, and then you cut to a shot that zooms in on him at the other end of the table, which I thought was interesting. That was an interesting way to present this scene.
Yeah, because you're not supposed to really trust Paul. I think he's kind of the red herring here in this movie.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, and again, this is why I think this is kind of giallo adjacent, because there's several points in this movie where you're not sure who this is and who to trust, and Carpenter does a really good job of kind of throwing around that hot potato of suspicion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to go through finishing the stalking section here, where Paul says, well, we'll research this company, this Excursions Unlimited. We'll try to find out who's sending you these packages, and he leaves. And the minute he leaves, the phone calls start up again. "Sweet dreams, Lee." So anyway, this is the stretch where Paul and her try to go to the cops, right? They try to figure out who is sending these packages.
Yeah. Well, that's after she goes to the bar. Remember?
Oh,
and
yeah.
And then all of a sudden she gets a drink, and the waitress says, "Oh, it's from a guy at the bar," and he's not there, which is also a creepy touch.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Two things. Yeah. So, okay. So you said that scene. So first, Paul, the boyfriend, goes and looks up on Excursions Unlimited, finds out there's no such company. I looked at all these records; they don't exist. And then this is where Lee goes out to dinner with her friend Sophie.
Right.
And this is where, they're eating Italian food, and someone sends her a bottle of wine in the middle of dinner. And Lee looks around, and it turns out the stalker was in the restaurant, sent her a bottle, but she never saw him. And she asked the waitress, who sent me this bottle of wine? And the waitress is like, I don't know, just some guy.
Yeah. Super creepy.
Although we do get a little bit of detail here, which is important for the movie, where she's having dinner with Sophie, and Sophie says she's considering taking a job in Fort Worth, Texas. This will become important later.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Now we're about to go to a turning point in the movie. Now that Lee is getting mystery bottles of wine in the restaurant from the stalker, now she's getting a little furious because this guy's getting a little too close to her. Because as far as she knows, she's been getting calls and gifts. Now he's following her into restaurants. Now he's probably driving around right behind her. She's getting pissed. So the next night when the guy calls, he's like, "I'm sorry you didn't like the wine." Now she snaps and she's like, "Who is this? Who are you?" She immediately hangs up on him and calls the cops. So now she's going to start being proactive.
The cops, who could not be any less helpful. He says, "I can't send anyone out to check on a phone call. In case he does anything, give us another call." Oh, my God.
Well, I was going to say, in the cops' defense, I think that's all they can do, literally, even to this day. If someone's calling you and there's no crime, what really could they do?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, they don't treat her very nicely. We'll just say that.
No. And that's another common theme in this is most people don't believe her, or they gaslight her. It just comes up over and over again.
Yeah, so the cops just cannot help her. They're like, "Look, somebody's calling you in the night on your phone. That's not illegal. Someone sending you gifts, that's not illegal. We can't do anything until he commits a crime. He's not even threatening you. And she screams. She's like, well, if he kills me, you'll be the first to know. And right when she says that, her lights dim again in perfect timing. And she just goes like, no! And she gets pissed. And she's going to be pissed really from here on out.
Yep. And she's just going to get more and more badass as it goes, pretty much.
Okay, so here we go. So she's just broken by this point. Poor Lee. You know, she's had to change her phone number. She's still getting calls, at least twice a day, she says. She's trying to keep a log so the cops can set up a tap on her phone. They're like, we're not sure we're going to do that. She's completely on her own. And I think this is the third present that finally arrives in the mail, right?
The threatening letter, right?
The threatening letter, and if I recall, it's a picture of the last girl who killed herself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this escalates here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now she's out for blood.
Yeah, now she's mad. And now he sends a threatening letter, and at one point he tapes a message to her door, so he's literally been at her front door, and he says, sorry I missed you, I'll be down in the garage at 11:30 if you want to come meet. Which, again, in most movies the heroine would not go down to meet the killer in his chosen location, but Lee is pissed, so we get a nice long protracted chase scene here where she's like, fuck it, I'm going to go kill this motherfucker, and she grabs a knife and she goes down in the garage to confront the guy.
Yeah, that is one of the best scenes in the movie. It is so tense.
Yeah, explain this scene to people. This is to paint a picture for people. She goes down into her creepy underground garage in her apartment all by herself with a knife, and there's this attached laundry room down there, which is the creepiest laundry room I have ever seen in an apartment. It's basically like a rape dungeon. Like I wouldn't walk in there. I'm a guy.
It totally is.
So explain this scene. This is John Carpenter at his peak here.
Yeah, and again, this is why I think this may have been influenced by Giallo films, because this is total Giallo. So she goes into this laundry room, and it's all quiet, and she's trying to figure out where this guy is, and she hears something, and she proceeds, and then, of course, she drops the knife down this grate. And so she goes down and takes the grate off and hides underneath here as this guy's she hears him looking for her. So she puts the grate over it and grabs the knife. And then this guy comes, and of course he stands right on top of the grate, and he's smoking a cigarette, and then he purposely drops it down the grate, doesn't know she's there. And she's just laying there, and it kind of falls on her, and she kind of lets it fall to the side. But this whole scene is just tension 101. Yeah,
there's a fun reveal at the end too, which always makes me laugh. It's not.
Here we go. Yeah.
It's not supposed to make you laugh. So yeah, she's hiding under a grate, and this stalker guy is walking above her, and you just see him from the feet and crotch straight up. She's looking up at him. He doesn't see her. So she climbs up out of the grate, and she's walking to get back to her apartment. And as she's turning a corner, she runs smack dab into somebody face to face, who we are meant to think is the stalker. We'll find out later it's not the stalker. But, Chris, I will give you the honor. Who does she run into?
Jerry, hello!
Uncle Leo from Seinfeld. Yeah, Len Lesser, who for years back in the 70s always played a thug because he's got a scary face. Yeah. And Uncle Leo shows up here as the stalker, and she runs into him, and it's... Again, it's not supposed to be funny, but if you know your Seinfeld, you just totally expect him to have, like, no eyebrows, like his eyebrows burned off or something.
It's so funny because, I have seen him in a couple of movies in the last couple of years, and he always plays just the biggest creep. And it's like a shock to my system. Blood and Lace is an early 70s, like, proto-slasher. He plays a total scumbag in that. And then there's this late 70s horror movie called Ruby with Piper Laurie, and he's in that too, and he's a creep. And then there's this one too. It's really funny. I don't think this was the first one I saw him in where he was a creeper, but this is a pretty big one.
Yeah, and we are going to find Uncle Leo is a peeping Tom. He really does creep around girls and take pictures of them through their windows. He's just not the stalker, and we'll find this out later. But he is a creep, And so she thinks she's run into the creep. She runs upstairs, and there's another note on her door from the actual creep saying, "Sorry, I missed you. We'll try again later." So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I looked at the notes too, and the first one was timestamped at 11:15, and the second one was 11:30. So within 15 minutes, he had left 2 creepy notes on her door. That is so that is so unnerving.
that's dedicated.
Yeah, nothing's gonna stop. Well, just like Sophie said about the guy at the TV station. He's like a Mountie. All these guys are kind of like Mounties. They're very dedicated. They always get their woman.
Okay, so the plot is going to escalate here. Lee knows she's being stalked. She knows he's sending her gifts. She knows he can call her on the phone. He seems to know what's going on in her apartment. He knows how to turn her lights on and off. At one point, she is able to stop the elevator when she's in it. He knows everything about her, but there's one variable she is not aware of yet. And that's going to happen this night where Paul comes over to console her. Paul and Lee are there. They have sex. They finally kind of break the ice. It's like their 4th date. He spends the night, and the stalker sees. The stalker is not pleased that she's having sex. But the next morning when Lee wakes up, she's just wearing her bathrobe. She's walking around the apartment in her bathrobe in front of her windows, and the stalker calls up when she's all by herself, and he says, "Lee, I like you better without the robe. Take it off."
Yeah, totally creepy.
So this is the first moment in the movie where she realizes he can see her.
Yeah, this totally turns the whole thing around for the third act.
And this is something my wife had always said when watching this movie. Why does she keep her windows open every goddamn minute of the day if she's got a stalker? How come she never figured out to close all these drapes on her windows? But this is the moment she realizes he can see her. She's like, oh no. And we get one of those Jaws shots where the camera zooms in and zooms out at the same time, where you see like her being disoriented when she realizes he can see her.
Yeah, the vertigo shot.
Yeah, the vertigo shot. And she closes all the blinds, and her blinds will all be closed the rest of the movie. And this is going to piss off the stalker to no end.
Yeah, this really gets to him. But I had the same thought too. I was like, well, wait a minute, why didn't she close her curtains? And then I realized, well, she didn't know.
Yeah.
She didn't know until this point in the movie that he was right across the way.
Yeah, and she's like on the 35th floor. Who could see into the 35th floor?
Yeah, and it was a different era too, and people didn't even lock their doors back then. So, people weren't quite as suspicious.
Okay, yeah, so now we have some hints on who the stalker is. He lives in a place called the Blake Tower across the street. He's got to be somewhat high up so that he can see into her penthouse apartment. And so her, Paul, and Sophie start forming a stakeout where they're going to sit there behind the blinds and look out in their telescope, try to find anybody who's looking at them. And this is where Lee is really starting to get pissed, where Paul suggests she move, and she's like, no. How dare he? This is my home. He has no right. How dare he invade my life? And I think even Sophie says, even though he's not doing anything, this is rape. Rape is when a man constantly keeps a woman in fear. This is rape. I don't care what the law says.
Yeah, I wrote that down too. I wrote both of those lines down because I thought they were key in this movie. But the interesting thing is, and again, to bring up Rear Window, this is when they become the voyeurs too, because now they're so paranoid they keep watching across the street. Now they're like fixated on this to try to get this guy.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, the tables are going to turn. They're kind of hunting him now, but it's going to be a cat and mouse game because this guy's really smart, as we're going to figure out. It's nowhere near as easy to catch him as we think. But Lee and her Paul and Sophie think they have the upper hand. They've closed their drapes. No one can see in. They've really effectively shut him out. And this is where she gets a letter that is now probably considered the first threat. Did you write down the wording of this letter?
Is this removal procedures beginning immediately?
Yes.
God.
Yeah, her latest letter from Excursions Unlimited says, "We regret to inform you that you have not qualified for our travel incentive vacation program. Your behavior has reached final point, and the only action left is removal. You will be removed immediately."
Oh, God, that's so creepy.
So now she's got her first oblique threat that he's threatening violence against her. Now we go to the cops for real. And now we meet a fun little character who, hey, surprise, is also in Halloween, Charles Cyphers.
Yep. Yeah, and now I think isn't his character in this Deputy Gary Hunt, which is another character in Halloween too.
Wow.
Carpenter likes to reuse stuff.
Yeah, if you don't remember Charles Cyphers, he's in The Fog, but he's more importantly in Halloween. He's the one that has to keep telling Donald Pleasance, look, you let him out. This is your fault. I see no evidence that he's here for tonight. It's just kids playing pranks. And that's basically the exact same speech he gives in this movie, too.
Yeah, pretty much. Carpenter doesn't like anything to go to waste. So.
Yeah. So the cop tells her, he's like, okay, he's sending you threats. We don't know who he is. We don't know where he's calling from. We can't do anything about it. The phone company won't put a tap. So these are his suggestions. He says, you could change your number, you could get an unlisted number, or you could just blow a whistle into the phone every time he calls. Very helpful police work.
Super helpful cops, yeah. But, that's the LAPD, I guess.
Okay, so here we go. We're now in Act 3. We're really in the final part of the movie. They kind of know where the stalker's coming from. They know he's threatening Lee. He's going to move in and go for the kill at a certain point here. And this is where Sophie kind of announces, to everyone, I'm taking that job in Fort Worth. This is too stressful. It's just going to be good for me. And Lee's like, no, you got to stay here. And Sophie says, no, I made up my mind. I'm going to leave in 2 days or whatever, tomorrow, I forget. This is very important in the plot in the movie. We have to lose Sophie here. Okay, so here we go. Lee comes home late one night and she's been drinking, and Paul says, don't go home drunk. That's just a bad idea. And once again, Lee's like, no, fuck him. I'm going home. The stalker's not going to drive me out. And this is where the stalker starts calling her late at night. It's 11:45. You're out late tonight. And then she's like, well, I hope you like the drapes, motherfucker, because they're strong and they're staying where they are. And he's like, I want to see you, Lee. And he's like, come out, look through the telescope, come find me. And so she's like, wait, he's looking at me right now? And she's like, I'm looking at you, come find me. So she goes outside, her and Sophie, I believe, and they look across to see someone across the street looking at her from a penthouse apartment. And they see him. It's Uncle Leo from earlier before. Hello, Lee.
Yeah.
So it's the exact same guy she met down in the basement she ran into. She's like, he's looking at me. He's looking at me through the telescope. That is the stalker. And this is where stuff is going to happen real fast because we're going to call Charles Cyphers in again.
Yeah, that's right. And so if I recall correctly, this is where he comes in and they're trying to figure out what to do with this guy, right? And so he says, sometimes we do things that are a little irregular, and we certainly won't get any medals for them, but as long as they get the job done, we feel they're all right.
I mean, it is the LAPD. They're not really known for by the book.
Yeah. I just love that line. I had to write that down.
Yeah, but anyway, this is a great scene. We watch Lee and Sophie watch across the street as Uncle Leo is arrested. We see the cops come in, grab him. He tries to run. And now we go to the police interrogation where they think they've caught the stalker. They think Uncle Leo, he's in here for postal fraud. Newman is going to interrogate him.
That would be a great twist.
Yeah, that would be great. But what do we learn from this scene? We learn that Uncle Leo is a peeper. He is known to take dirty pictures of women through their windows. He has access to the lights. He's a mechanic. He has been in their laundry room. He's been in her building. He's just a general creeper. They're like, this is the guy. We have the guy. And Uncle Leo, pleads ignorance. I didn't do this, but they really think they have the guy. And they deport him to Iowa, if I recall?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they send him away immediately, pretty much. I don't know how they did that, but yeah.
Yeah, we've got this guy who's a sexual predator. Iowa, you want him? And then Iowa's like, yeah, sure, why not?
Well, what else do they have out there, really? I mean,
we could use the population.
Yeah.
So Uncle Leo has been deported. Jerry's going to be very upset. Nana's going to be very upset. And that's the thing with the John Carpenter movie. The calls all stop. Now that we've arrested the red herring suspect, all goes back to normal and all is right in the world. And the calls stop and everyone's happy. And for about 10 minutes, Lee looks like she's going to get through this unscathed. She even opens her drapes again.
Mm-hmm. And then he pulls the carpet out from under you. Then there's a little switcheroo here.
Yeah, now shit gets real because now the letters start up again from Excursions Unlimited.
Mm-hmm. And so are we to the scene yet where she goes into her restroom? Because this is creepy, too.
Okay, I'll get to that. Yeah, she gets one more letter that said, removal procedures beginning immediately. Lee must be removed from the premises. And she's like, oh, shit. And she starts calling the cops, calling Paul. But no one believes her because they think they've arrested the guy. They think he's out in Iowa. And now, like you said, this is the part of the movie where no one believes her and she's starting to freak out.
You almost, I was watching this part again today, and the way it's filmed and the way it's written, you almost start to wonder, is she hallucinating this? Mm-hmm. For a little bit here, you're like, maybe she just really is crazy.
Yeah, and they do play with you. We're meant to think maybe Paul is the killer or the stalker. Maybe Lee is actually crazy. It really does start to mess with your head. Again, very deep for a TV movie of this era. They were not normally this intricate.
And Hutton does such a great job of selling this. I mean, just the way she's strong through the whole movie, but she does kind of start to break down a little bit, and she starts to lose it. And she does a great job of this.
Is this the bathroom scene with the mirror? That's what you're talking about?
Yeah. This is seriously creepy. So she's kind of wigging out, and she goes into her bathroom, and if I recall correctly, isn't the shower running?
Yeah, the shower's been running. Someone has been in her apartment and turned the shower on.
And someone has written on her mirror in the what is it, the steam, mm-hmm. I guess. No one believes you. And she's staring at it. She's just standing there staring at it. And then it sort of melts down. It's a really cool effect.
Yeah, I think this leads into the scene. There's a really big scene here. I don't want to spoil it, but she calls Sophie to come over. And Sophie says, oh, sure, I'll come over. I'm leaving for Fort Worth tomorrow, but I can help you out tonight. And Lee's like, the stalker is still alive. He's still taunting me. And Sophie's like, no, he's not. We arrested him. He's gone. And Lee's like, this fucker is still messing with me. And she goes out on her balcony and she sees someone up in a penthouse apartment staring at her through a telescope. And she's like, that's him. This ends tonight. I'm going to go murder him. And so, like I said, those are like my daughter and my wife love. She's very proactive. She's not going to take this. And this is a really long, perfect John Carpenter scene where Sophie stays in Lee's apartment and watches through a telescope and talks on a walkie-talkie as Lee walks across the street and tries to break into the guy's apartment and kill him, basically.
Yeah. And I hate to bring up Rear Window yet again, but this is a really strong homage to that, but different, because in this movie, you get to see inside the apartment that Lee goes into, and she's looking for evidence and stuff. And then you get to see from her point of view into her own apartment across the street, which is really cool. And this is when we see, well, I'll let you say what it is.
Yeah, this is fantastic because this whole scene is shot through a telescope lens. We just see the little crosshairs and the lens, and we see Sophie looking at Lee across the street, and we see Lee looking at Sophie back in her apartment, and Lee is in the killer's apartment. She sees his tape recorder, she sees his notebook, she sees a catalog with bugs, she sees tape reels. This is it. This is the guy. And she's talking with Sophie across the street in her walkie-talkie. She's like, Sophie, I found him. This is it. We have all the evidence we need. And just when she says that, this is when the shit is going to hit the fan because poor Sophie back in Lee's apartment is not aware she's in the apartment with the killer and she's about to meet her maker. And this is, for a TV movie, this is a horrifying scene.
Oh, I know. This is so hard to watch. and you see poor Sophie getting attacked and strangled. And Lee is looking at her and she's just freaking out. And then she's like, I got to get out of this room and go across the street and see if she's okay. And then, well, back in the day, we would have cut to a commercial because it fades. And then we fade back in and she's back in her apartment. And I believe the cops are already there, right?
Yeah, it's something. Sophie gets jumped. Sophie gets strangled. Lee has to run across the street, and by the time she gets there, the cops are there, but there's no body. The stalker has killed Sophie, taken her body somewhere. And this will become an important plot point because no one believes that Sophie is dead. They think Sophie went to Fort Worth for her new job. It turns out that someone went on the plane using her ticket. The cops do not believe her. And this is the last stretch of the movie where everyone thinks Lee is nuts.
Yeah.
Like, the guy is in Iowa. He's arrested. He's gone. Sophie was not murdered. You are crazy. And she even takes them back to the killer's apartment, tries to show him all the evidence, all the tape reels and stuff. They've all been cleared out. And they even tell her, the guy who owns this apartment is out of town for a month. No one was in here. So Lee is really just straight cracking up at this point.
Yeah. And Charles Cypher's like, nope, she got on that plane. She took off, And so, and even at this point as a viewer, I'm going, okay, what really happened? It's kind of cleverly done.
I just had to laugh when I was listening to Charles Cypher because he's almost reciting the exact same speeches he does in Halloween to Donald Pleasance. He's like, You're jumping at shadows, Doc. I don't believe in the boogeyman.
Yeah. I guess just what Charles Cypher does.
Yeah, so Lee goes back to her apartment. She gets a phone call. No one believes you. And Lee's like, fuck you. I'm just going to kill you. I hate you. I'm going to get you. This is where she goes in her elevator. He stops the elevator. Like, she's just fucked. He controls every little thing about her life, and she doesn't even know what's up or down anymore. And it's going to lead to a very terrifying last 20 minutes.
Yeah. And I feel like this bit with the elevator, too, is kind of foreshadowed earlier. Like that shot I was talking about where they're outdoors and she's looking for Paul, and you see the elevator go up the side of that building. So then at this point in the movie, the elevator becomes a plot point again because, we think the stalker has stalked her into this elevator and is screwing with the lights, and then she hits the emergency brake. So it's kind of interesting. It was like foreshadowing from that first act with this elevator.
Okay, so let's get to the very end of the movie here where Lee goes to Paul, her boyfriend, and she says, nobody believes in me. Do you please say you believe me? This guy is still stalking me. And Paul says yes. He sighs and admits. He's like, I do. I love you. I believe you. And so they try to brainstorm. Who could this guy be? He's in our building. He's in the building across the street. He controls the elevators. He controls the lights. He controls the climate, the air conditioning. He has a master key to everybody's apartment. Who is this guy? And this is where they do the work that perhaps the police should have done earlier.
Yeah.
Where they're like, hey, what if it's a maintenance worker?
Yeah. And we should mention that, so this is right after that the stalker has tormented her with the audio of Sophie dying.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Over the walkie-talkie. This is totally creepy.
Okay, so they go to City Hall, and they ask for who has maintenance records to access all these buildings to get into all this stuff. And the guy says, we have these, what are they called? Monitors. We have monitors. Yeah, we have employees called monitors that can basically get into any high rise in the building, and they're there for emergencies. They do maintenance. They do inspections. They have skeleton keys. They can get anywhere. And so they finally look through the records, and they figure out there's only one monitor in Los Angeles who's been in all these buildings where these people have been dying. These girls have been committing suicide, into Lee's building, into the building across the street. His name is Herbert Stiles. And he's, a 10-year employee, never had any problems, never been disciplined. He's a model employee. But Paul and Lee are like, that's the guy. All the dates match. He's always in the buildings when these girls are committing suicide. He's always in my building.
Such a perfect stalker name, too.
Herbert, yeah. They agree. They're going to go to the police with this information. They're going to go arrest Herbert Stiles. But, again, like I said, Lee is not taking shit in this movie. She's going to go to this guy's house and kill him herself.
Yeah, now she is like just full-blown stalker herself. And nothing's going to stop her.
And she has been told, someone says, this guy Herbert Stiles is out of town on vacation right now. She's like, good. She's going to break into his house, and she's going to start fucking with him, which I love. She's going to start messing with all his equipment. And I got to say, this scene is so Halloween. There's so many little Halloween tricks in this scene where she's breaking into his house.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Like the first person, it's all shot in first person. It's like the shot in Halloween when little Michael Myers is walking into the house to grab the knife to stab his sister at the start. That's what this scene is like. Later we see a pair of legs walking towards her. It's very much like Michael Myers walking through the brush. It's exactly a blueprint for Halloween later.
And this is all taking place in the dark too. It's so effective. And then somebody comes to the door, scares the hell out of her. It's really cool. And this is only maybe 2-3 minute scene.
Yeah, it's not very long. She's very proactive and very determined. And again, he's not there, but she sees all the evidence. She sees Excursions Unlimited. She sees his typewriter. And there's one shot where she's taking a cab to this guy's house, and as she's in the living room talking to Paul on the phone, look, this is the guy, we arrested him, you see a shadow walk right behind her in the window, which, again, such a John Carpenter shot.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's the cab driver, right, who's waiting for her?
Yeah, it's the cab driver. It's a false ending. Herbert Stiles is not here, but Herbert Stiles is going to be mad once he figures out that she's been in his apartment, because now she's going to go back to her apartment, and now we get the final battle. That he has entered her place, she has entered his place, they both knew who each other is, and now we're going to get one final battle, the final girl against the villain back in her place. And this is absolutely fantastic, this final scene.
Yeah, I had forgotten how cool this was when I was watching this last night. I was like, man, this last 5 minutes is just one of the best parts of the movie. It's so well done.
Okay, let me set it up for you. So she goes back to her apartment, and I think the door is ajar. So she knows he's in her apartment.
Yeah.
And she could call the cops. She could call Paul, but she's not going to because she's going to end him. Because this is my apartment. Get out of my fucking apartment. And so she walks in. And the next 5 minutes, I swear, there's not a speck of sound on the soundtrack. It's just her silently creeping through her apartment looking for him, all shot in first person from her perspective. Just lots of little John Carpenter tricks. Like at one point, there's a little click, and the camera does a double take to look at the click. It's just a neat little touch.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The suspense is almost unbearable here because he will not pop out. He's just hiding.
And this is where she gets the note, or she sees the note that's supposedly written from her, right?
Yes. Yeah, he has written a suicide note that on her table. Yeah, it says, what did she write? Here it is, no touch of sadness for anyone to bear, no guilt. I simply can't go on, Lee. So this is the night she's supposed to die, like everybody else who dies at his hand. He's written her suicide note. She's going over that balcony at some point in the next 10 minutes, but she's trying to surprise him and overpower him before he can do it.
It's the night Lee came home.
Yeah, very good, yeah. But it's really smart. He has shut off all the lights in her apartment. He's turned off the fuses. He's disconnected her phone. But she opens her drapes. She knows all the ways to get more light in here. She knows the tricks to her apartment. It's kind of like Wait Until Dark, the end of Wait Until Dark.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, the blind lady's up against, Alan Arkin? I forget which Arkin it is, but yeah.
Yeah, it's Alan Arkin, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really cool. It's a cat and mouse game just in the dark. And again, I cannot get over the fact there's no music in this whole chase. It's like the end of Silence of the Lambs. It's just so fantastic. I just wrote in my notes, this is so effective. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. And not to dwell too long on this, but this is another reason why I love The Exorcist so much, is because a lot of The Exorcist is actually really quiet. There's no score, not much going on. It's all, a little bit of sound effects and stuff, but it really makes it more realistic when there's not a lot of stuff going on. Mm-hmm. You can just focus on the visuals, and the suspense is just off the charts.
Yeah, and again, I can't say enough that John Carpenter doesn't cheat. He doesn't use loud music cues to make you jump. He doesn't love jump scares just to have jump scares. He will just let you sit there in the uncomfortable silence for as long as you have to be, and I just love how he milks it.
Yeah, that's why he's my favorite too. That and the master shots he uses. He uses a lot of master shots in this in this film. Just full room shot. You see everything going on, even if it's in the dark. And it's so effective.
Although I did catch another little John Carpenter touch you'll get a kick out of. There's a there's a scene in Halloween where they're at the hedge. Michael Myers hiding behind the hedge, and Annie walks up and grabs the hedge, and he's not there.
Yeah.
And if you look close, you can see John Carpenter's cigarette smoke come up in front of her face.
Right.
A real famous blooper. There's a moment in this scene, too, either this scene or the one before, where Lee is standing in a door frame, and if you look close, you can see John Carpenter's cigarette smoke come right up in front of her face.
No way.
That's right. That's the kind of stuff I look for when I watch these movies.
Oh, my God. I have to go looking for that. As soon as we're done with this, I'm going to go look for that.
Yeah, I will find in my notes. I wrote exactly where it happens. It's somewhere in this movie where she's by herself, and it's a close-up of her face right against a wall.
Oh, yeah. Please tell me where that is, because that's fantastic. That's so Carpenter.
So anyway, yeah, Lee is trying to get out the front door. She runs to the front door. It's jammed. The guy has broken the lock. She can't get out. And again, she should be scared. It's her against the killer. But this is where she starts taunting him instead, which I love. She's like, "You're hiding, aren't you? You're afraid of me. You're afraid to get too close." And she's like, come on, dickless. Come on, face me. I'm still scared. You still got a good chance to beat me. Come on, come find me. But he won't come out because he's a coward. And she's like, "It's like that? I don't even get to see who you are?" She's like, "That's it. Last challenge. Last chance to get me." And this is where all the ending is going to happen real fast here.
Yeah, and this ending is an exhilarating, 30 seconds or a minute. I mean, this is what I was talking about earlier, where I don't know how they shot this. This is just crazy.
Yeah, I have almost no flaws with this movie. It's like a perfect TV movie. My only complaint is that the ending is way too quick. It happens so quick, and then the credits roll.
Oh, okay. I can kind of see that. Yeah, I guess. But I actually, watching this again last night, I think I didn't think that as much as I did the first time I watched it. I was like, oh, okay, that was satisfying. But the first time I watched this, yeah, I was like, whoa, that kind of came out of nowhere.
Well, remember, it is a TV movie. We got to get to some chunky soup commercial or something.
That's right. But I will say, like I said, this last minute or so, when this climaxes, this little duel here is just great.
Okay, here we go. So she knows he's hiding in her apartment, and she challenges him. He won't jump out and get her. So she tries to catch him off guard. She runs for her balcony. She's got this big old window and sliding glass door balcony where she can get outside. And she runs out there and tries to get outside, but he has locked it. So she throws her chair through the glass window. Again, we're like 35 floors up. And she tries to get out the window, and she starts screaming, "Help, help, murder, help." And at some point between the first murder and the third help, all of a sudden he's behind her. And I don't know where John Carpenter got that jump scare, but all of a sudden he's right there grabbing her. It's unbelievable how quick it happens.
Yeah, he just comes out of nowhere. And as I said, I don't know how they filmed this. Like, if they actually filmed this in an apartment building, or if that was a rear projection of an apartment building across the street, because she really goes for this glass and just shatters it. Mm-hmm. And then there's another shot coming up, which is even more crazy. I would love to know how they filmed this, but I just don't have that information. But it's really effective. Yeah,
there's not much written about this movie, so I don't know.
Yeah, maybe there's some information on the Blu-ray, but I just don't have it.
Maybe Lauren Hutton has an Instagram account. I'll have to send a message to her.
Yeah, ask her if she still thinks this is the best work she's ever done. That'd be pretty damn cool if she said that.
Yeah, so anyway, there's a fight. He grabs her. He's trying to struggle with her. He's trying to basically strangle her, but she fights back. She fights him off. He can't choke her, so he tries to throw her out the window instead. And this is where we get them struggling out on what appears to be a real balcony on a real 35th floor of a building.
It's just it's an incredible shot. Like, I really don't know how they did it. I was like looking at it close, like, was that a matte painting or what the hell's going on? I don't know. It looks real.
And I should point out, we still have not seen this dickhead's face the entire movie.
Yeah, that's right.
He's fighting her from behind. He's strangling her. All he's dressed in is a nondescript blue mechanic's jumpsuit. Tell me if that sounds familiar to Halloween.
Yeah, it does sound a little familiar.
Yeah, so anyway, he tries to shove her out the window. He tries to throw her off the balcony, but she's feisty. She's clawing him. She's grabbing him. And then at one point, right before he's about to throw her off the balcony, she grabs a big chunk of broken glass that has been dislodged when she threw her chair out the window. She grabs it, and she just stabs him right in the back as hard as she can. And he screams. And she unleashes himself, or she unloosens herself and gets away from him. And this is the only time, literally, there's 8 seconds left in the movie, we see his face. And how would you describe his face?
I don't know, doughy maybe?
Yeah, he's just a fat, middle-aged, balding guy. Like the girl and the lady in the restaurant said, just some guy.
Kind of like a Maytag repairman.
He's Fred Mertz. That's who he is.
Fred Mertz.
Yes.
Jesse White or one of those guys, yeah.
She has stabbed him in the back. He screams. He reaches back. And as he's reaching back, he leans forward. We see his face for like a minute. And then he falls forward, tumbles off the balcony, falls 35 floors to his death. And literally that's the whole movie. And that's why I say it ends very abruptly for how much tension there's been in this movie. And then she just kind of looks down and she sighs and she says, "You got too close."
Yeah.
the classic Lauren Hutton quip.
The end, yeah.
And then we freeze on her face and the commercials come up. And then the, "You being stalked in your home? Call Allstate."
I will say one thing that I wish we had gotten maybe a little more closure on is Sophie. We don't know what happened to her, if she's really dead or what happened.
So you think the stalker fake strangled her and let her go out of the goodness of his heart?
Well, I don't know. Maybe like a brief funeral scene would have been nice or something.
Yeah, they look down and Sophie's not there, and Dr. Loomis is like, "I shot her 6 times."
There you go. We'll splice together these two movies. We've got to have Donald Pleasance coming at the end. Yes.
I watch Sophie stare at the wall, stare through the wall, looking to this night sheriff.
There you go.
Sophie has come to your little town, sheriff.
Oh, man. Yeah, we'll have to do a fan edit.
Yeah, but anyway, that's the movie. A very simple TV movie about a stalker, a lady getting stalked by some old guy across the street. But in the hands of John Carpenter, easily one of the best TV movies I've ever seen. Again, not a straight horror movie, not super bloody. There aren't a whole lot of killings, no jump scares. It's not like one that's going to keep you up at night, but like it really does get under your skin at times. It's really effective for what it is. And I am so happy that, Chris, you turned me on to this movie a couple of years ago, which coincidentally was right after you were turned on to it. So there you go.
Yeah. And like I said, I just slotted it into that 6-film marathon of TV movies blindly. I just knew it was Carpenter. I'm like, okay, I'd like to watch this. We're going to check it out. And like I said, I was floored by how good it was. It is honestly one of my favorite Carpenter movies, and I don't say that lightly because, as I said, he's pretty much my favorite director, and I've seen just about all his movies. I think there's like 2 or 3 I haven't seen, but I would put this right up there. This would be, in my top, I don't know, 6 or 7 Carpenter films, really. Way underrated. And so good. And one of those movies where I watched it last night in preparation for this, and I immediately wanted to watch it again. I think, you pointed out some things in this that I didn't even notice. And every time you watch this, there's new little things going on in the background and homages that you can catch. It's a real gem. And historically, too, where it falls in his filmography and how it was filmed before Halloween, it came out a month later, and it's just really cool to see him at the beginning of his career, but he's already firing on all cylinders too.
Yeah, and this is available on Blu-ray and DVD now, right?
Yeah, Scream Factory has a Blu-ray of it, and I think it has some special features. I still need to pick that up. Yeah, I would pick it up. If anybody's interested, pick it up while you can, because sometimes their stuff just goes out of print and without much warning sometimes. So, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so again, that's the lesson here. John Carpenter was awesome. Early John Carpenter, especially awesome. Find this movie. You will not regret it. My wife and I show these old movies to my daughter who's 22, And she's about, 50-50 on old movies. She doesn't really like the style sometimes. A lot of them are She couldn't really be less impressed by a lot of older classic movies. But we showed her this one, and she was like, that one was pretty good. I like that one. So that's high praise from a 22-year-old right there.
And a lot of that goes to Carpenter's writing, Lauren Hutton's performance. She's so good in this, and her character is so great. Adrienne Barbeau too, I think, does a great job, and it's like you said, it's a progressive character for 1978. I think this just really stands up. I wish more people would check it out. And as you said too, a lot of those old horror TV movies, there's some real gems there. I love so many of those. It's like one of my favorite subgenres is horror TV movies of the 70s and 80s. I got a real soft spot for that stuff.
Yeah, I just picture these families, gathering around the TV in 1978 and being exposed to this movie. And then, the parents have to calm down the kids afterwards. Look, it's not real. It's just a movie. Nobody's stalking you. I just love the image of these families watching these TV movies back in the 70s.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure some of these had to just warp people, or the 80s ones too, like Don't Go to Sleep. Oh man, we've talked about that one before.
I have not done that on Staff Picks yet, and it's only because I cannot find a good copy. Every copy I see is like fourth generation VHS dubbed on YouTube. It's almost unwatchable. But that is the single greatest horror TV movie ever, and if I can ever find a good copy, I will cover it.
Oh man, yeah, it is so great. As I said, I'm still partial to Duel, but that's right up there. That's I only saw it a couple of years ago. I didn't see it. I remember when it aired in the 80s, but I didn't see it until a couple of years ago, and I was shocked at how hardcore it went in places. Like, wow, they really went for it.
I saw it when I was 8. It was on TV.
Oh God.
I was at my grandparents' house, and I only watched the first half hour. I remembered that movie for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
I remembered every little detail, and I didn't even see the really scary parts at the end. I just remembered the little kid falling off the roof and his head exploding into a watermelon.
Yeah.
Yeah, then someone got electrocuted in the bath. I'm like, this isn't the Disney stuff I'm normally watching at age 8. I'm not sure my parents want me to see this.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some great imagery in that movie. Some stuff that you'll never forget.
Anyway, we're about to sign off. I'm trying to keep these horror episodes short. We got about an hour 40 for this one, which is a good amount of time. I think a little longer than the movie even. Anything else you wanted to say about John Carpenter or anything before you sign off?
Oh boy, I could talk for hours about John Carpenter. Yeah, I love the guy, and I actually got to see him in concert a couple of years ago too, on Halloween, and that was just unbelievable. He played all his famous scores and played some new stuff, and yeah, I think he's great. He's sort of a renegade filmmaker and kind of rough around the edges, and a guy who was never really well respected. When all this stuff was coming out, other than Halloween, he's always been kind of a dark horse in the industry, kind of an outsider, and that just makes me like him more. And a movie like this, which is so good, which a lot of people haven't even heard of, you really got to check out, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely have to do The Fog at some point on Staff Picks. I'm a big fan of The Fog.
Oh yeah, that's another underrated one.
Although, I'm glad you mentioned that about the soundtrack. That's the one thing this movie's missing that it doesn't really stack up to the later John Carpenter movies. He doesn't do the music in it. A lot of the music is like very generic TV movie stuff, and at least the scenes that actually have music. It's not his stuff. Can you imagine this movie with Halloween music? It would be unbelievable.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, the guy that did this score was Harry Suckman, who did a lot of TV work, and there's really not a whole lot of score in this. I think the times it does come in, it's pretty effective, and as I said, he's kind of channeling Bernard Herrmann, Hitchcock's main composer. But yeah, with a Carpenter score, they probably just didn't allow him to do it. He was young, early in his career. Like I said, they only gave him 11 days or 18 days to shoot this. So I think he said something like, well, he did what he could. He exerted as much control as he could, but he didn't have that much.
It was a TV movie. It's like, here's $50, go make a TV movie.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to send you guys off to go watch Someone's Watching Me, which, again, terrible title. I wish they would have given it. I think it had a different title. Wasn't it called High Rise, you said?
High Rise.
Yeah, which is a much better title.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
Yeah, Someone's Watching Me with an exclamation point seems real hacky, but whatever.
Like a sitcom or something. that exclamation mark, yeah.
I was waiting for Jack Tripper to burst in the door and save her at one point.
Oh, no.
All right. Well, anyway, I want to thank you for stopping by. I think this is your third or fourth time on Staff Picks. You also hosted my 100th episode. So, yeah, Chris is one of my good friends, and I really want to have you on again. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. It's always a blast, and I'm always happy to come on whenever you want me.
All right. Once again, my name is Mario Lanza. This is Staff Picks. If you need to reach me, you can reach me at staffpicspodcast@gmail.com or on Twitter @MarioJLanza. And until next time, I'll be out there searching for more movies that deserve more love. And because this is Horror Month, they will all be horror films. Anyway, I will talk to you guys later. Watch out for Uncle Leo. See ya.